Hello, my guys. In this video, we are going to be looking into other features of Django. If you have been following my tutorials, you will notice that we have done a lot in this full stack development training. We have covered areas like the bootstrap. We've also covered the areas like Django installation and Django application. And we have also looked into some of the components of the admin and then creation of Django model. And if you look at here, this is what we've done in our previous training, and we created users, but these users are not displaying on the front end. So we actually, because we are building a dynamic application, we need to make sure that whichever thing that we have at the database is also showing to our users. And we are actually building a membership application, and it's just a simple membership application in the sense that we only want to display the users details on the front end, making what the content of the website rendering from the back end. And that is actually what we have been doing from the beginning of this training up to this moment. So let's get started. And you can see the last thing we did was we created a model. Excuse me, let me pull this one down here. Okay, we created the models, and we also registered our models in the admin, and that's why we were able to see them on the admin page. All right, so now what we actually need to do is to learn how to work with what we call Django variables, and working with Django variable from the models. So the first thing is we are going to be looking into a static Django variable, how to render variable into our Django template. All right, so we have this one as our application, and we have this as our project. And inside of our application, we have our templates. And inside of our templates, we have this home view. So what we need to do is to make sure that we render a dynamic content into our template. Let me put this one down. All right, now remember that Django is an MVT platform, which that Django is a model view template. So it has to get all the information, all the data from the models, and then send to the view, and then the view is going to control the logic on how these data are going to be rendered into the template. And the template is going to show us, or show the users, what the content of the data are. So that's what Django represents. So whatever we are doing, we must first of all work on the models, which is representing all the information from our database, and then we now control the logic such that our application is going to be secured, and then we now render them to the templates. So let's get started. So what we need to do is we need to go to the views. So we have created this view, but what we need then is to make sure that our view is coming into this, our models are being rendered into this, our Django views. So we can just say from dot models, because we actually have models in the same directory with our views. So we can say from dot models import, and then the name of the model. So let's look at the models, and the name of the model is member. So let's import member. So we are now importing member from the model. So from this model, we are importing this this class member. Okay, so now we need to pass in this member as a variable, and to do that, we can actually say that set up a context. There are so many ways we can do this, and this context is going to be an object. It's going to be an object. For now, we can just pass in a variable. We can say member is equal to member.object.all. So this is what we call Django template tags. So these are template query, or what we can call query sets, Django query sets. So we use it to query the database. That's why we call it the Django query sets. So always make sure that your letters, you are following your conventions. If you're making use of capital letters, it is case sensitive. Just note that. So we have member equals member.object.all, because we want to get all the objects in this model. So that's what we are actually saying. So from this model, we want to return all objects that are here. And that is what we are why we are making use of this objects.all. And also remember, this is a method, so it's going to have this on it. And then we can then pass in this variable into this context. So we can just say that member, or we can just pass it as member, or we can just say member equals member. It doesn't make member is member. It's still the same thing. You can just pass it into this. Now we need to tell the this return render, because this is where these things are passed into the templates. So we also need to tell it to also include it on this. So we can just pass it in by mentioning context. So there are, like I said, there are so many ways to do this. So it's either I just say the variable and then I can do the same thing here, or I can just, it depends on how I want to do it. So, but just watch what I am doing. So we have passed in the context from here. So let's now go to the templates and let's have a list, or let's rather have a list. So we can use this Django tag for loop to do that. So for member in members, so what we are doing here is we are trying to iterate. If you remember in Python, when we are using for loop, we use it to iterate within a loop of items. So we are going to also do something here. We are going to say end loop at the end of it, end for. So this is a for loop, and this is where the for loop ends. And then these are just paragraphs to get us the member name. So to get the member name, we can use this Django template tag, which we are going to use member.name according to how we specified it on the model. So the model is the major thing that we need to take full control of. So what we have here is member.fullname, member.hobby, and member.email. That's what we are going to have here. So here is going to have, we are going to have member.fullname. So I think that is a capital letter. I think that's a capital letter. Full name, like this. Let's be sure. So full name, that's capital letter. And then we will have member.hobby, hobby, and member.email. So let's close this server and rerun the server again. So let's see what we have. So python manage.py run server. Let's see what we have. Cannot access local variable member where it is not associated with a value. Okay, so let's debug this. Okay, so what I found out now is that I was trying to return something that does not exist. So I made a mistake. So just make sure you have this as members, or you can just, this thing can also take anything, but based on what I defined here, is going to be members so that I can access the variable from here. So from this particular object, which is context in my own case. I just hope you understand that, what that means. So what we actually do, let me just explain it in a better way. So what we are actually doing is that we have this model which represents our backend or our database, and it has a class of object with member, and it has these attributes with full name, hobby, email, and so on. And we already created this, and we can access it from the direct Django admin. As you can see here, we have these members. Now, but we want to access them through the front end. So what we are going to do to be able to get that is to have this model, and we need to import it into this view so that the view can take charge of all the other logics that will happen here. So we now had to create this variable members, and we used this Django query set, which is, we are calling this member and we want to get all member, and that is why we say dot object dot all. So if I should remove this or comment this thing out, recall that if my server reloads and if I go to the admin area again and refresh, see what I have: member object 1, member object 2, and member object 3. So to access this should be member dot the value of the attribute. So since we now made use of this particular function to be able to see the content. So if I undo this and my server reruns, if I refresh this, I start to see the names, the full names of those people. So the same thing is what we are actually doing in this view. So we have to use that, and then we now have our HTML. And inside our HTML, let me actually remove this one. And inside this, we have a for loop to be able to iterate between all the users And then in the for loop, we have an unordered list. Let me, if I should change this to ordered list, which is OL, this is going to now iterate to list all the loop through all the members of that object. So if we rerun this, we should have it as one. So there is an issue. And the issue here is that it is only giving us number one and number one and number one. And this is the only problem that we will encounter. I'll show you what you will need to do in this case. But then let us do something more. The major thing is that you have seen how to render your variables, how to render your objects into your Django template. So the next thing that I'll be showing you is how to use a base layout so that you don't actually repeat yourself anytime that you want to do a certain task. So let's get on to with that. So I'm going to come to my templates and I am going to a new file. I can call it anything, but let's call it layout just to make sure that it is conventional. You can call it base, you can call it master, but I want to call it layout. So I will call it layout.html. And in this layout, I am going to cut off all these things that I have here and put it inside the layout. Let's remove this so that we don't interfere with the codes. All right, then down here at the body ending, I'm going to cut it off, Ctrl X. Now here I am going to use a Django tag, and I am going to say block content. So let's call it content actually. Block content, and we are going to do end block. So let's use end block. So this is all we need to do here. So what we're actually doing here is that we want to be able to render whatever content we have on other pages inside here. So whatever other pages we have is going to start with this. So we are going to have this Django template tag, and is going to have extends, and is going to extend to layout.html. So it is extending to layout.html, which is this. And then one more thing is block content. So we are now calling these ones the blocks that we want to render at the end, and this is going to be the end block. So whenever Django sees this, it will now know that these are blocks that are going to be rendered on the layout.html. So let me pull this one up a little bit. Let's end this server and rerun it again. Python manage the try run server. Now let's see. So we can see that our server is still running. We are not encountering any error. Let us add one more page. So let's create another page from here, new file. So let's create about.html. So here, let's just, to be fast, let's copy what we have here. Copy that, paste it here. Let's now remove this content of the home page and use H1, and we say this is the about us page. Okay, so let's see what this will do. Okay, first thing, we need to also make sure that this thing is found on our views. So let's see. So we have about, but it is not returning anything. So return render, and it's going to return render with requests, and then about.html. So let's see. So our server is reloading automatically because I have saved this work. So if I go back and append /about here, let's see. So you can see this is about page. And if you go to view page source here, you are going to literally see that this is returning everything, and it just placed this one. So this is what block content does. So you can also call it block anything. If I want, I will call it block Richard. And if I should do that, if I should call it block Richard, then it actually means that on this layout, this place is going to take block Richard, and then here at this place is going to now be the block Richard. So it's just like these are the blocks, and Django is taking this so that you don't repeat yourself. In most cases, when you want to put up your CSS and every other files, you don't need to repeat yourself. So this is what we call the Django master or base template. So this is how we can do it to return a dynamic template instead of returning a static template. So the next thing we'll be looking into is how to add your styles and static files like your CSS, your JavaScript, your images, and every other static files into your Django. So let's get on to that. Now, to do that, what we actually need to do is to come to our Django application, not the project, but the application. So you have to be careful. In the application, as you can see, here is my application. We need to create another folder, and we are going to call it statics. Static. And inside the static is going to contain all our static files like images, CSS, JavaScript, and so on. So we are going to create another folder and call it CSS. So in the CSS, in my CSS, I am going to create styles.css. So just to make everything easy, let's use H1 and let's give it a background color of green and text color of white. Okay, so just for testing purpose, so we can just come to our layout And the top here, just before my HTML starts, I am going to do load static so that I will be able to load my CSS. And then the normal method of adding your CSS. So here I can use link, and we're going to use this Django template, Django tag, which is here. So this is just how to do it. The Django tag with static, and then followed by the directory where you find your CSS. I will need to reload my server. Ctrl C to rerun your server, to close the server, and then python manage.py run server again to run the server back. Now the server is up and running. Let's see what we have. Let's go to this. Let's make sure we have H1, since we are styling that H1. So let's have H1. Hello. And if I save it and my server will run, okay, I have H. So, but there is an issue. So I think what we need to do to be able to make sure that this CSS is run is we should go to, because we have to set the directory where our static files are. So we need to tell Django where to locate our static files. So what we need to do is we go to the Django project and we look for settings.py, and we scroll back down to where you find your static URL. So here we need to set the static URL and the static directory. So that's very important. Okay, so I think this is supposed to work. It's supposed to work. So I think I will need to rerun my server, because sometimes we have this issue. So let's rerun my server, python manage.py run server again. This is supposed to run, but it's not going to run your CSS in the production setting. You need to make sure that you are in development setting. So set the debug to true. So always make sure that your debug is set to true when developing your application, but when running this website actually in production mode, you always set it to false, so that you are not going to expose the credentials of your system. So again, we also need to set our allowed host from here. I can just use a Tomcat, something like this, just to allow all the hosts. So let's see what will happen again. Disallowed host. So I think our allowed host, let's use 127.0.0.1. So this is also our host. We can also use local host, just in case. Local host. And finally, we can also use this 0.0.0.0. So these are local host servers. So let's see. So you can see that our CSS is up and running. So always follow this process. If I set this thing to false, watch. False should be capital. Okay. So allow the server to rerun, or rather python manage.py run server. Let's see. It's still showing this, but actually sometimes in the production mode, it normally would not show. Okay, so what you actually need to do is to collect your static to be able to make it visible to the live server. I'll still show you that at the end of our training, not particularly in this particular video, but in another video. Now there is an issue. If you look at here, you see it is showing us 1, 1, 1. So we actually need to be able to iter it to be able to give us 1, 2, 3, and as well as the numbers. So let's go to our home.html, and we can actually do something here. Take this OL out of here and move it outside. Take this one as well outside. Let's, okay. So I think if my server runs, let's see, you can now see it is numbering properly. So that's because I moved this one outside. So always note this. So if you have any question, don't hesitate to use the comment section, and I'll be there to answer your question. In the next video, I am going to be showing you how to use Bootstrap and every other CSS framework that you actually want to use on your application, so that we can make this application look better and finer to our liking. I thank you for being with me in this particular video. Please, if you have not watched my previous videos, I am going to leave a link at the top. You are going to see a video pop up at the top. Please go to the videos and watch them. They will help you to be able to understand this particular video. This particular video, before you can watch it and understand it, you must have watched the first 2 videos on my Django tutorial. I am also going to, at the end of the series, I am going to arrange it as a series, so that whenever you come in, you will see them in a chronological order, so that you can actually follow up sequentially. But as it stands now, I want you to always watch the previous video before you follow up with any of my recent videos. Thank you, and have a very wonderful night. Peace.